Welcome to On Common Ground with Dusty Keene. I'm super excited today. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for this interview because, A, I don't get to talk to my good buddy very often, but I begged and pleaded with him to come on and do this thing for me, so he agreed, and he's incredibly busy because of not only the work ethic that the man has, but with just such a full life as a dad and a husband and all the other things that he has going on. So I'm grateful that he took the time to come in. I'm going to read a little bit about who we have today that I'm so super excited to have. We have Mr. David C. Cook, and David is a director. He's an editor. He is a producer. He's currently working on CBS's series SEAL Team. He has edited numerous feature films, episodic television series, and documentaries, including I'm actually he graduated from the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, North Carolina. And he also was nominated for the Hollywood Post Alliance Award for his work. And his thesis film, Man and Dog, won the Student Academy Award in 1998. His credits include SEAL Team Editing, Television, SEAL Team NCIS. He has The Good Wife, Lie to Me, The X-List, Shark. His feature films include The Joyriders, Cover Blend, Dying on the Edge, his documentaries, working with James Cameron. That's right, James Cameron on The Ghost of the Abyss and The Last Mysteries of the Titanic. He also has produced feature films, including The Foot Fist Way, which I hope to talk about a little bit, Undertow, All the Real Girls, George Washington, Doomsday Man, Hearsay, Surfacing Reckoning, and The Surprise Party. It's quite a resume you have, David. When you hear that about yourself, you get a little taller.
What's that? Sorry, say that again. When I hear that about
when you hear that resume about yourself, you feel a little taller. I mean, you're already a pretty tall guy, so I think it might be hard to do. Well, how are you, man? It's good to see your face.
Yeah, good seeing you. I like your digs. I like musical instruments. I need to put some of mine up.
Yeah, it's funny. We were shut down for 6 months at Flatiron, and so I made the stage like a Tonight Show set. So I've kind of like put a desk and everything up on top of the stage and lit it up for doing this, and it's been really, really fun.
Yeah, I haven't been back since we opened Flatiron. I haven't been back in, I was supposed to come back this summer, but that got all crapped out. But I haven't been back in 2-3 years.
Man, it's been, interesting for everyone. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I want to talk about like how, you and I first met, man. And like this, when we met, it was really, I always loved the movies, but I was really young. I was like 11 or 12 years old. And I was working at a, right up the street, like the closest thing to my house was a movie theater where I grew up, and my parents actually still lived there. But one day I was there, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had dropped, and they were so busy they had no one to clean the theater. So the manager there grabbed me and said, "Hey, kid, if you want to clean this movie theater, I'll let you see the movie for free." So I did, and then after I cleaned that movie theater, I was like, "Hey, I live right down the street, man, and I love the movies or whatever." She was like, "Well, anytime that you want to come up here and clean the movies, clean the theaters, you can see movies for free, and you can have free popcorn and soda." So I remember some of the fondest memories of that time in my life. I would go to the terrace, and I would clean out the movie theaters, and there was like people would drop change and stuff, when they saw the movies. So fortunately, like every day almost, I could find enough change to buy like a pack of cigarettes at Texas Shirley's machine, and then like a cheeseburger combo, and eat it on the roof at the terrace, man. And I would go see movies, and so I like lived up there. And part of that was getting to meet all of these people that were older than me and in high school, but worked at a movie theater. And one of those was the great Dave Cook, man. And he was running projectors up there, which was like the really cool technical job that all the other kids couldn't do, and everybody was like mystified by. Like, oh, he does the projectors. That's a serious job. Like that's the one that was really above the pay grade for a lot of the people that were your same age that were working there. But so many good memories there, so I wanted to kind of start with that. Like we've known each other a really long time.
Yeah, well, what's funny is that's identical to my story. So when I lived in Lakeland, Florida, growing up, and my best friend and I got caught sneaking into Terminator back in I guess '85, and the theater manager said that he was either going to call our parents or we could clean the theater. And I'm the son of an Episcopal priest. Actually, probably a lot of people in Greensboro know him, Father Cook, formerly of St. Francis Episcopal Church, retired now. But the theater manager, put up that option. I was like, well, you're not calling my parents. So we cleaned the theater. And then he did the coolest thing. He said if we couldn't afford to see a movie, if we were willing to clean the theater before and the theater after, we can stay and watch a movie. As long as we were old enough, that was a stipulation. But he never really paid attention to that. Yeah, every weekend we would go and we'd watch a movie and we'd clean the theaters. And then during the summer, we'd see pretty much everything that came out. And that was my introduction. I already had a love for movies because of Star Wars, which a lot of people does. That's nothing unoriginal. Yeah, nice. So I had the same experience, and started working when I moved to North Carolina, and I got a job at the Terrace even before I could drive. But I got my license my freshman year in high school, so was able to start driving, and that was my after school. I'd go over and watch a movie, and so I just started like, well, I might as well work here, so I started working there. Jane Dempsey was the manager there, and that she's the one who did the same thing for you that the other manager did for me. And in Florida, Central Florida, so all the older kids would pick me up and put me like in a trash can and then push me down the aisle, and I'd end up with popcorn buckets of dip spit all over me and stuff. And so when you hung out of the theater, you were a little shit. I hope we can cuss on this. You reminded me exactly of who I was.
I was saying for sure.
Yeah, no. So it definitely was an instant liking to because of the similar storyline. And actually, I credit working the movies and theater and for spurning my interest in filmmaking, but also particularly editing, because as a projectionist, you get to watch movies over and over and over again. You see how the stories are told, and you see how it's told through the image. And then, when you walk away from the projector, you also hear how the story is being told. And it allows you to kind of separate the two. And then you realize that it's not 50-50. It's not, the cinematography is the most important part of it, or the sound and how that's used to manipulate the audience and tell the story is as crucially important. And I credit myself being a good editor from being a projectionist.
And you used to have to do it the old school way, man. Like when a thing would break or something would happen, you have to cut the film, the actual film, and then put it together, and the thing. And that I recently was talking about like just taking me back. I recently went and visited the old Regal that used to be the Regal, and then became the Dollar Theater that was way out Gate City Boulevard. And now it's been closed, and they closed down, and I went there, and they hadn't done anything to this place since like, it had to be like 89, and they still had the old huge film pan reels up there, and like still old like trailers that would come in that you would have to put on, and and so it just took me back, man, to some of those days, and I got to reminisce. But what you were talking about, how you got to see the different elements of how stories are told in the movies. That's one thing that I really am just so, I think, lucky to have been able to work with you in some ways, and be a part of things with you, but also like just the collaboration of it. I don't know of anything else that has that much collaboration in telling a story. I mean, there are so many people involved in making a great movie that it has to all come together, and everyone really has to be great at what they do.
No,
you have to trust that.
Absolutely. And I got to direct an episode of SEAL Team last year. And that's where you really learn as the director. You think everybody's going to look to you, and they do. But the reality is the director also needs to look out to everybody else. And, we've got technical advisors that were tier 1 operators, both as SEALs and as Delta Force. In the writer's room, and at every level of production, we have, veterans working, and there's no better way to communicate and talk and find out how things are going to be. And one of the first things that I noticed in my script is I had a vehicle interdiction that I had to do, and our producing director Chris Chulak had a vehicle interdiction in the very first episode, and it was like, French Connection, Ronin. We had drones flying all over the place, and I was just like, holy crap, how am I going to top that? Because there's no topping Chris Chulak. But then I started talking to the operators and stuff, and I was like, okay, Chris had 3 days to shoot his interdiction. I had half a day to shoot my vehicle interdiction. I didn't have all the resources and assets. But in talking to the SEAL team members about how they do vehicle interdictions, I also realized there was another side to it that we hadn't shown yet. And I decided to make it the cool, calm, practiced vehicle interdiction where, we've rehearsed it. We know exactly what we're going to do. Our number one, Bravo 1, basically sees the situation and makes the audible play call like a quarterback does. And we just go into precision car movements, and it's quick in and out, and we take the guy. So it had a different feel to it. It was just something else that I could bring, but that came from talking to the people who really do it. It's just, we're so lucky to have the veterans on our show that we do. And my assistant is a former Marine. So I chose him. He was a new assistant for me on this series, and I chose him specifically because of his military background. So it helps us on every single level.
That's another thing I don't think people think about, but when you're in the movie industry, when you're telling stories, or even when you're doing video production and stuff, you really learn so much about what you're doing, the story that you're telling. I mean, I kind of done things with like manufacturing, production stuff that I had no idea how something was made or how whatever, but you get so immersed in it when you get to do the projects that you learn so much. I can't imagine now what your respect for, and it's the Navy SEALs, man. Wow. Did you ever think like you'd be doing? I'm sure we did. We dreamed that, but like, dude, you're working with the Navy SEALs directing a TV show. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's actually funny because there was a time in my life where I was either going to make movies or I was going to go into the Navy. I either wanted to be I'm fascinated with the planes, wanted to fly. Top Gun had a lot to do with that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So movies influenced me, even when I was young. And submarines always fascinated me, but I kept being told by people I was too tall to be a pilot, and I was too tall to be a submarine. So I was like, okay, well, if I choose
something against the tall people, man. Sorry, I got a whole thing about that. Like, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. I feel bad, not really, but too tall. That sucks.
So I figured I would, if I went into filmmaking, I can always make films about people in planes and people in submarines. And then I end up working on 2 Navy shows. I end up working on NCIS, and I end up working on, I spent 7 seasons on NCIS, and then moved over to SEAL Team. So I get to, play in both worlds. And we did a submarine episode in season 2. It's definitely in the top 2 episodes of SEAL Team, in my opinion. And we had a Navy commander come up from San Diego, and we were sitting there, and we were in, it's probably a tech meeting that we were in, and they showed a submarine. Our production designer showed a submarine that we were going to use, and I was like, actually, it can't be that submarine. So because we're using, line of dialogue wise, we would need to be an Ohio class submarine that's been converted for SEALs and not a Virginia class submarine. The commander looked at me and he's like, your submarines, and I was like, yeah. That was kind of fun.
I want to speak a little bit to that submarine thing. I knew that you were going to be great in the movie industry when Red October had come out, and Jane gave you the poster. And you took this poster. So I had all these posters that I would scavenge and grab and stuff, but they were always like ripped or taped to my wall with some Scotch tape and shit. And Dave comes in, man. He got given this poster for Red October, and you had it like professionally framed. It looked extremely, this looks so clean, and you took so much care and concern in that, having that poster of The Hunt for October, which was a incredible movie about submarine, and submarine.
Actually, still
even
use.
back in the day.
Yeah, I even use that movie when I'm in teaching at AFI. There's a sequence in the middle of it that editorial is just one of the best sequences put together. And if you read the script, it actually came from two different scenes in two different parts of the film, and it intercut them. And it's when Sean Connery is talking, basically giving the whole message of what the movie is, and he's talking to I think Bordy. And it's just the use of sound, the use of the camera angle tilting to a Dutch angle, and you're not sure if you're dealing with a crazy captain or not. And they're intercutting between the two submarines, and his dialogue's playing underneath the all the cuts, even to the exterior of the submarines, where you see the relationship between the two submarines. And it's literally the message of the movie and how you get that message across. And it's just a really smartly edited sequence that wasn't even scripted to be that way.
Yeah, man. I'm thinking back to that scene. How incredible! And I'm not thinking too, because you came from an editing track, I think that may prepare you better to be a director or to do anything really position-wise in film, because it's such a crux of everything position. And you think about Jaws, right? If he was going to go under, Spielberg was, budget-wise, shooting on the water like that, which everybody kind of told him beforehand, but if he hadn't have figured out how to edit that and not even show the shark, saved that movie, and also made it eerily legendary. And that was all because of the editing.
And Verna Fields was the editor on that movie, and they even shot some stuff in her pool after the fact, that where Ben Gardner's head comes out of the boat, and when Richard Dreyfuss' character's under the water, that was actually filmed in her pool, and they were editing basically in the pool house. That movie was built in the editing room, and the shark didn't work, so they hid the shark, and it made it that much more suspenseful. I agree. I think editing, because everything comes together and during the editorial process. I may not learn how to speak to actors, but I learned to recognize what a good performance is. I may not learn what lens know what lens to put on a camera, but I know what composition is, and I know what depth of field is, and I know how to put the shots together. I may not learn about what cloth is going to do what, and what production design, which is a huge part of everything, but you learn through telling of the story how it impacts, how props impact, how everything impacts the overall image. So from editing, you do get a little taste of everything, and might not know how to write the dialogue, but I know editing's made me a better writer. Editing has made me a better director. Editor has made me a better producer. So I agree. By the way, you mentioned Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles earlier. One of the actors is from Greensboro. I think it was the guy who played Michelangelo in that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle was a Grimsley. Yeah, he was a Grimsley graduate.
Oh, no kidding, man. I did not know that. I think everybody has a love. I would hope everybody has a love for movies. I know you and I certainly do. And I feel a really overwhelming uncertainty of what is going to happen to this moment, the thing. So in my life, whenever I needed some solitude, whenever I needed to just break away from everything, I would say a form of meditation for me, in a way, would be able to go to a dark theater a lot of times on a Monday matinee and see 2 or 3 movies. And I've done that my whole life, ever since I was a kid at the theaters. I still used to. Here in Greensboro, our theaters have been shut down pretty much since the beginning, and aren't open now. And then I just saw the release that said that over 500 legal theaters are shutting down, definitely, and that's here in the UK.
Cinemark's not.
What do you?
By the way.
What I mean, you think they're going to take them? I mean, what do you think is this something that is going to change the whole landscape of movies? And we already see, Netflix and Hulu and all of these powerhouses that have just come out recently and grabbed the market share from, everyone from HBO to these big studios. What do you think? I mean, you've got your fingers on the pulse there in LA. What do you see happening?
Well, I think it was already changing a little bit even before the pandemic for those exact reasons. Also because you can buy like 85-inch, televisions and watch, in the privacy of your own home. I have a backyard movie theater because I can't not have a movie theater. So I built a backyard movie theater where I have a 9-foot high, 16-foot wide screen with 4K projection and 7.1 surround sound. I always invite my neighbors over just so that, and they don't generally come, but they're aware that I'm going to be playing loud. I also and I could also throw up classic movies and then put headphones on because they were in stereo or mono to begin with. And so at midnight I'll throw something up in the backyard and just watch it with headphones on. So I do think that it was already changing a bit, but there isn't an equivalent to watching films with an audience, and I think that's what people are probably learning. I don't think theaters are dead. I think there's going to be a mass surge back to the theaters when people feel safe enough to go back into the movie theaters, because of the social element of it and getting out of the house. I think people are tired of being in the house. And right. Movies have always been the it's cheaper than a concert. It's the cheapest form of entertainment to go to a movie. And when we worked in a movie theater, parents, particularly during the summers and weekends, would drop their kids off because it was easy babysitting for them, because they just trusted that the kids will be in the theater watching a movie while they're running their errands and stuff. So I think
it's like American culture, I had like my first date at the movie theater, like my first flight was outside of the movie. Like, what I mean? All these things sort of revolved around a movie theater because it was a one spot, especially when you're in this really, growing pains adolescent time of life, when you can't go to so many places, but you can go to the movie theater, and that's the social thing, and you're safe and everybody's there, and, you can kiss your first girl in the dark theater or whatever it may be. There's a lot more to it than just the business transaction and seats on a big screen,
Yeah. Well, and right now, drive-in movie theaters are open. And I know Tenet's playing the drive-in movie theaters. We've gone to probably 6 or 7 drive-in movies since the pandemic started here in LA. We've got some more options, but between Greensboro and Winston-Salem, there's a drive-in movie theater. And I went and saw drive-ins when I was a kid in Lakeland. My best friend's mom would take us. They had a conversion van, and we'd get on the roof of the conversion van, and we'd be watching the screen that was PG. The van would be facing the screen that was PG, but we'd be on top of the van, and we'd turn around and watch the rated R movies. So we saw like Emerald Forest and Porky's and movies we weren't supposed to see, but we could hear it because the car audio was playing the screen we were supposed to be watching. So I've always
great.
Yeah, I've always loved drive-in movie theaters and think it's a great experience. And then Alvis Moorhead, who was the head projectionist at the Terrace movie theater, he has an amazing story. He started working in a movie theater when he was 14 years old, and he's African American. He wasn't allowed to be seen, so he couldn't be a ticket taker, couldn't be an usher, he couldn't work in concessions. So he started off, he would literally sit behind a screen and he would open and close the curtains because nobody was allowed to see him because he worked in an all-white theater. And he eventually moved to the projection booth because that was another place that he couldn't be seen. And so they allowed him to move into the projection booth. And he projected at all white drive-in movie theaters. And he's the person he taught me how to tear movie projectors down and build them back up. And came in, after Terrace, I moved to Brassfield Movie Theater. And then when I went to North Carolina, when I went to North Carolina School of the Arts, I started working for the Ray Regis Archives, which was the largest privately owned film collection in the United States, which was in Winston-Salem. No longer in Winston-Salem. UCLA bought the library. Well, School of the Arts has half the library, and then UCLA has the other half of the library. But we were working on really old projectors. We were restoring 70mm projectors. We were restoring 35mm projectors. We had a projector that we would literally take into backyards to like the executives from R.J. Reynolds. That came off of a destroyer, World War II destroyer. It was a chain-driven projector, and we made it a portable projector we could take and do screenings for fundraisers for the School of the Arts and stuff, and that was a lot of fun. But Alvis has a great story.
I don't think he's still alive.
He's not. He's not. He passed away probably almost about 10 years ago.
Yeah, I remember I used to go up even years later when I would come to town to Greensboro, I would go and just pop in the side door of the chest and go up there and talk to him. But he used to spend about all kinds of things his days, like running theaters running the projectors at the Carolina Theater, and like some experience there. He was just a wonderful, just beautiful human being. Man. I love it. I know that song, No Alibi. You like that song? he was so cool. And I was so glad that I got to meet him. But these days, you've always been, I thought, a good writer. And if you were to pitch, so how would you go about it today, knowing that, it's not traditional in the way that it used to be, right? I mean, music and film have both changed drastically in the past 10 years. But let's say that you wanted to take a project and you wanted to make a feature. What strategy would you use to do that? Like how would you do it? Like, would you pitch Netflix? Would you, where would you want to see this, distributed, and how would you get it done?
It depends. It's interesting because we're in a little bit of a trickier time for a lot of reasons. COVID being a large part of it. So with that, right now, the more self-contained you can make the film, and the smallest of crew that you can have, the better for you. Virtual production is going to be big, and you've got but it's not inexpensive. That's the misconception. So we were even asked on SEAL Team if we can shoot it virtually, and it's like, no, not with the budget that we have. And there were other people that were above my pay grade that were making those decisions. But the reality of it is if you want to take the two virtual productions, the two models are basically Avatar, where it's very heavy post-production and you've got complete control over it because you've done a lot of motion capture and everything's basically digital. Or you've got Mandalorian, where it's heavy pre-production, where they build these worlds and you go onto a virtual set where they are projecting on LED screens. That LED screen volume that they created, the stage is a $20 million stage. So that's the whole budget for our series. So there's no, we're not doing that. And those are but costs will come down and people will figure out how to do it inexpensively. And it's not like this isn't tried before. At Murder on the Orient Express, everything outside the train window was real-time projected. And if I was beginning to learn filmmaking right now, I would be looking at Unreal Engine, and they've got great tutorials and classes and stuff that you can take, and it really they also have a handbook that's basically for virtual production that will teach you a lot about that. And then once you know the technology, make sure you're writing to that, what can be done in that world. But I don't think things, story-wise, stories are stories. That's the most important thing. If you write a good story, and someone will figure out how to shoot it. And that's the biggest key thing. And expand your horizons. I mean, people used to tell you to write what you know. And I don't necessarily think that's true. I think it's research and learn, and then write that. So find out find the good story, write that, and it'll eventually be found and it'll be made. People will figure out how to do it.
What do you think, as someone that not only is, I think, a master at editing at this point, but, you do teach as well. And so what do you think is something that is a foundational element, or something that is really crucial in being a good editor?
Understanding story. It's simple. It's understanding story. There are about 10 different story structures. Understand those different story structures. There are watch movies over and over and over again. Watch them without sound on, so you see how the pictures go together, and how the stories are being told. Then watch it again with just the sound on and the picture off, and see how they're using sound to help manipulate and tell a story. Sound's the only thing that can go off the screen. It also works on you subjectively. So the great thing about sound is you can really direct point of view through sound. It's also, when you see images on the screen, like I'm looking at you right now, I see a drum, a guitar, a clock, a microphone, you. So I'm taking everything that's in the screen. Now you can manipulate that with lighting, and you can put more light on your face and take light off of the instruments, and then I'm directing the focus and the point of view of the story through the image. Sound is like a soup in a way, because when you eat a soup, you're like, oh, that's a good soup, and you're not necessarily taking the individual parts and going, oh, I really liked the pea, or I really liked the chicken broth, or I really liked the beef that was in there. With sound, you're not separating it into its ingredients parts, so you can really manipulate the audience through the use of sound. So if you want to be a good editor, you want to be a good storyteller, understand picture, understand sound, understand story telling, the story structure. And you see something you like, then go back and rewatch it and figure out why you liked it. So if like there are stories that I lean towards. I like the hero journey. I like having the moral compass. There are I can appreciate the other stories, but I grew up, with the fantasy films and going for the escapism into the films when I was younger, and that's what's always stuck with me. I can appreciate the other stories. I think Martin Scorsese is one of the most elegant people speaking about films, and he's made some really brilliant films, and I can appreciate them. But it's not the stories that I want to tell, because that's more that is more to real life. Whereas the Star Wars, recently, I love Stranger Things. If I could have made anything in the last 20 years, it would have been Stranger Things. So there are things that you cater to. A lot of storytelling. Sopranos came out, it was groundbreaking, and everybody loved it. I thought it was good, but I didn't love it because it's glorifying the anti-hero instead of a hero, and I like the hero. And same thing with Breaking Bad. I thought Breaking Bad was great. I really thought it was brilliant in the beginning, because you saw where Walter White was as a person, as a character, and you understood why he got into where he was.
Right.
And it was the healthcare system that that got him into that. But then there was a point where he didn't have to do it anymore, and there was that clear point decision where he, this was now his life, and he continued in it. And for me, that then it started to be less interesting to me at that point. Although I think it was correct for the character, and I think it was correct storytelling, it's just not the stories that I like, and I like the heroes. So find what you like, and find out why you like it, and then write to that.
What a great piece of advice. So I want to come back to a question. It's just you had this little marinate a little bit. I'm going to ask you what a few of your favorite movies are. But I know, so in the South particularly, here Greensboro, Winston for sure, where the School of the Arts were. And those of you who don't know, the very first directing class at the North Carolina School of the Arts, you were a part of.
No.
And wasn't that the very first one?
I was in the second class. The first class. So John Rotan, who went to UNCG and was also worked at the Terrace Movie Theater. He was in the first class, so I sat in on some classes with him while I was at UNCG. I sat in with classes with John and realized, no, this is where I want to be. So I transferred so I was in the second class.
So in that second class, that was you and Jody and Danny and Matt and David Gordon Green?
Close. So the second class, myself, David Green was in the second class. Danny and Jody were in the third year. They were a year behind us. But we all crewed and worked on each other's films and stuff. So yeah, I had 3 years with Danny and Jody and 4 years with David Green.
I know that, one of the movies I think was shot was like one of my first experiences ever working with Matt McNeil and meeting like this whole crew of people from the School of the Arts, from Nick and all those guys. And I think you produced that. Because I remember you being on set for one of the shots where I couldn't drive the stick. So Matt didn't let me try to drive his Jeep, and there was no fucking way he's gonna let me do it after like the first time. So like you had everybody in the back of the Jeep like jumping and shaking it in the shot, which was funny as shit. And I think Tim Moore actually shot that, who has shot a bunch of stuff with Danny and those guys. So everybody around here is like huge fans, of course, of Eastbound and Down, and the success that happened with those couple of classes that came out of the North Carolina School of the Arts, which now they tout, of course, is like, this is why you should come here, because these people who have done so well, have come out of here. From what I hear, from the last I heard, these guys had moved from LA to Charleston, and like sort of all kind of hang out there and are doing films out of there. Do you see, especially with Georgia, man? Georgia's like cranking out insane amounts of content now. Do you think that the shift has left LA for good because of the expense to shoot there?
No, actually, I mean, there's still more production that's done in LA than anywhere else. And it's ebbs and flows on the East Coast. I mean, there was a time where North Carolina was the second largest state for film and television production. And then you have a governor that comes in that not only gets rid of the incentives, but taxes the film production. So they all move out of North Carolina. And where do they move? They move to Georgia. And, interesting connection between the person who owns the state in Georgia and McCrory. So,
that next year, they did $6 billion in film revenue. Unbelievable.
So yeah, there's a lot that's going on in Georgia, and Tyler Perry is just doing a phenomenal job down in Georgia. He bought an old military base and turned it into a studio, and I still don't know how he produces the amount of content that he produces in the time that he does. Rough House moved from LA, so David Green, Danny McBride, Jody Hill moved their production company to Charleston, South Carolina, and they've done Righteous Gemstones out of Charleston. They did Halloween out of Charleston, but they also still shoot. They've done stuff in Charlotte, and they've done stuff in Wilmington also. And a lot of it is you have to follow where the incentives are. We shot in Georgia before Georgia was even big. Undertow was shot in Savannah. All the Real Girls was shot in Hendersonville, Asheville. George Washington was shot in Winston-Salem. And there are a lot of great filmmakers coming out of the School of the Arts. Jeff Nichols, there are the television show Carnival Row and Pacific Rim comes out of School of the Arts, and there's just a lot of talent that's being created, and not to plug my alma mater, and I teach at the American Film Institute. Rated the trades places with USC as the #1 film school in the world, and right now AFI sits at #1. But the School of the Arts, what people don't necessarily realize is the School of the Arts, the first 2 years were designed after USC's graduate program. The second 2 years were designed after AFI's graduate program. So it is a blend of the #1 and #2 film schools in the nation. And the only reason why they're not ranked any higher, and they're ranked #10 in the nation, the only reason why they're not ranked any higher is because they're outside of LA and New York. And that's really what affects them. But the School of the Arts, the education that you get at the School of the Arts, if my son, who wants to be a lawyer, but if he wanted to go into filmmaking, I would very much recommend the 4-year program at the School of the Arts as an undergraduate, because I don't even feel like you need to go to a graduate program after that. Whereas most film schools and undergraduate programs, your next step would be to go to a graduate program, if even that. Because just like filmmaking is becoming more universal, a lot more easier access to learning how to make movies and stuff, and the cost of North Carolina School of the Arts is by far less than AFI or USC, to an extent, if I was looking at the cost of some of the film programs, I would, we made George Washington for less money than it would cost to go to 2 years at USC. So part of it is
that film,
go make it and learn.
Yeah, and that film is what started the whole ball rolling, man. It seems like George Washington was the one that blew everything up for everybody in that crew. And you produced Foot This Way, and that was an interesting story behind what happened with that, because that was a low budget feature that you guys did, and that was Danny McBride and Jody. And I really see the Kenny Powers in that character for sure. Which kind of developed into the East Side of Down thing, I think. But
yeah.
So as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, so Will Ferrell sees this film and then goes, "Man, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna put my name on it and say Will Ferrell presents," and then kind of gets it out there. And is he the one that brokers that kind of situation between a Foot This Way, which you produced, into like the East Side of Down thing?
No, so. First of all, you say producer. There are a lot of producers on films, so I was just one of the people that helped produce the movie. That was really Jody Hill's vision and movie. And Danny's first acting job was in All the Real Girls, and he's my favorite character in All the Real Girls. And I would recommend anybody who likes Danny. I wish Danny would do more dramatic stuff. He's brilliant at the comedy, but he's also really brilliant at dramatic roles. And if you watch All the Real Girls and you see his character arc, it's the best arc in the whole movie, in my opinion. So Foot This Way, Jody made, Jody and Danny, Ben Best and a lot of people, Jenny Chickus, and were involved in making that movie. And they shot it on Super 16, and that was a world that Jody grew up in. Jody was if I remember correctly, Jody is actually a Taekwondo. He's a black belt in Taekwondo, which that's free. I think he was actually on Olympic track at one point. with it. So that was the world that he kind of grew up in and created this character. And then Danny became the character. And you're right. You know, I mean, Eastbound and Down was picked up shortly after Sundance in 2006, where we sold Eastbound and Down. I mean, sold The Foot Fist Way. But that's, you know, I don't deserve a whole lot of credit for that. I mean, that is Jodie's vision and Danny's character, and you know, I would love for them to actually produce not a behind the scenes, but an extended version. Here are all the deleted scenes, because there was a whole kind of Fight Club storyline with Jodie's character. And it comes down to storytelling. It was, you know, there were great scenes, there were funny scenes. Yeah.
It's fucking ridiculous. I mean, that's just, I'd love to go to Settlement sometime, man, because I think that's Jesus. Some of the shit that comes out, I was like, what?
Yeah.
So that had to be fun.
Yeah, and Righteous Gemstone is Danny's creation, and you know, there's some really great behind the scenes stuff on that series as well, and Danny talking about growing up and his family that you know, his mom would put on puppet shows for the church and stuff, and Danny would have to participate in that, and that's how Danny kind of learned his storytelling and growing up through that. And you know, it's a great group of guys, because they have really great unique visions unto themselves, and then they just collaborate so well with each other.
But it's really cool to see people come out of school together, man, and stay together, you know, through all of it. And it's something, because it's pretty legitimate fame and pretty legitimate success in the field, and still choose to stay together and work together and be together, and even remove themselves from the you know, the thing that is, you know, living out in LA and doing that, and just be able to have enough you know, just network and throughput with what you can do to be anywhere and do it, and then choose to do it together. So that's really cool. And
yeah,
something that came right here out of Winston, you know.
It's interesting because there's a lot of truth to that. Is you know, I worked for Roger Corman before I you know, even graduated from film school. So when I graduated, I had a job waiting for me the day after I graduated from the School of the Arts, and I just drove across country. You know, and that group stayed back, and David got his film going, and George Washington. So I became the LA side of it, handling, you know, all the lab work and post-production out in LA and finishing the film. And so I was really the only one that was kind of in LA. You know, Tim Moore came out for color timing and stuff. And Tim was my roommate for 3 years in college. You know, there was a lot of fun and satisfaction in working with your friends. I had paying working jobs. Nobody got paid on George Washington. And I was out in LA doing that kind of as side work, because I was working on films that I was being paid on. So, you know, my path diverged from them, but I kept working, you know, wanting to work with them and wanting to work with Dave Green. And I think the first film of his that I couldn't work on was Pineapple Express. Was the first film. Yeah, so he's like, yeah, well, yeah, so he's like, can I get you for 2 days? And I was like, you know, I'm going to watch it. And Dave still invites me to watch his editor's cuts and director's cuts and of his movies. And most of the films still post in LA. So I always, you know, still stay in touch and in contact with them, even when I can't work on their films. And, you know, for vacation last year, I you know, went down to Charleston for a week and just hung out with them while they were shooting Righteous Gemstones. And, yeah, and people are like, you went on vacation and you went to a film set? You're on film sets all the time. It's like, yeah, but you know, I haven't watched my friends and seen my friends work in a long time, and to get to hang out with David and Jodie and Danny and you know, Jeff Bradley and you know, Chad Hanley, and just a bunch of the, you know, they've really kept that the you know, a large portion of the School of the Arts together. You know, whereas I broke away and have just missed it. You know, missed them and missed working for them. So
that's really cool. What a cool story. and a cool group of guys. And, you know, anyway, I want to kind of talk to you, as we mentioned earlier, about some of your favorite films, and why you love them. Because, you know, you see films from an edited lens, which is different from a lot of people. And a lot of people who watch movies don't watch movies like people who make films. And so your reasons will be a little different. But I'm interested to hear anyway. I think I can guess a couple, but I'm not going to. So I want to, you know, just a few of your favorites and why.
Okay, well, first of all, be glad that you don't watch it the way people who make the films watch movies. The first time I watch a movie, I try to forget everything. I don't try to look at the editing. I don't try to look at the cinematography, the lighting. I try not to take any of that into consideration and just enjoy the movie. You know, there are a lot of great movies. I mean, Star Wars is absolutely the reason why I got into the film industry. That grabbed me when I was 5 years old. That came out. I saw it a lot when it came out, and that's the reason. You know, but I thought I was going to go into special effects because that's what blew me away about it. And eventually, yeah, nice.
I'm obsessed with it anyway.
So Star Wars is the perfect hero journey. And if you really kind of break down the story structure and you look at the hero's journey, that's step by step. That is Star Wars. And it wasn't until I started, like, I always knew I loved Star Wars. It wasn't until I was like, why do I love Star Wars? And I start breaking it down and I see that, you know, learn about the hero's journey and take that into consideration. So a lot of the movies I see have that in it. I do think Citizen Kane, and I know it's stereotypical, is the best film ever made, and Casablanca is right up there also. But they're not movies that Citizen Kane. It's just a masterpiece, and that's one to if you know the historical context of it also, in what he brought from radio into movies and using sound to help tell the story. It's really the first flashback narrative structure story. Maybe not the first, but the you know, recognize that as a masterpiece in that type of story structure. The cinematography is just fantastic and amazing in it. You'll learn a lot just from watching that movie with the sound turned off. But it's also not, you know, that's not a movie that if it's on television, I'm not just going to stop and watch it. You know, movies that I can't turn off are, you know, Rocky is, you know, everyone's like, oh yeah, it's one of the best sports movies. It's not a sports movie. It's a love story. Boxing's the backdrop of it. And that, you know, just the arc for Rocky Balboa, and, you know, he doesn't want to win the match. He just wants to go the distance because nobody's done that with Apollo Creed. And he sets that goal. And, you know, for that character to travel 30 years of storytelling and still be a character is just, you know, an engaging character is just an amazing feat in storytelling. And everybody's, you know, thinks about, you know, the Marvel movies or the Star Wars movies as far as, you know, the franchises with the long story arcs. But think about Rocky, you know, they've had very few missteps in Rocky. I also very much, I love the father-son storylines. You know, Searching for Bobby Fischer is you know, a film that I love. And it's very much about the, you know, a father-son storyline, and chess is just the backdrop. Strictly Ballroom, made by, you know, Baz Luhrmann's first film, I think is a great movie, where ballroom dancing is just the backdrop. You know, Rudy, you know, love Rudy. If it's on, I can't turn that off. Another father-son story. Breaking Away, another father-son story. And then, you know, movies that are just epics and should be grand on the screen, and should be seen in the movie theater and up on large screen. You know, Amadeus, I think, is a brilliant movie. Oddly enough, Tom Holtz is a North Carolina School of the Arts graduate, who played Amadeus. But they, you know, they don't make Amadeus anymore. It's, that type of movie, and I miss that. I think that's a great movie. Lawrence of Arabia is a great movie. And then I appreciate some movies just because of their story structure. Christopher Nolan's Memento is a brilliant movie, and the fact that it's told from a character who can't remember, doesn't have long-term memory, has to write everything down and leave himself clues because he forgets things real quickly. But they told that story backwards, and by telling it backwards, they put the audience in his same point of view, because you don't know anything that happened before it. But if you took that movie and you put it back in chronological order, that would be one of the most boring movies ever told. You'd be like, okay, who cares?
Yeah, they way noir going what? But yeah, that's the thing. That doing it backwards was the key to that. Man.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So and it's done for the purpose of putting the audience into the point of view of that character. And I think the good movies do that, so that you start relating to the characters and feeling for the characters. I love every movie. There's good movies, bad movies, movies of every kind, big budget, small budget. Peanut Butter Falcon that came out last. It was probably my favorite movie.
Oh my God! Did you see what I wrote about that? I was raved about that, man. I thought that was fantastic. God, I love that one.
Yeah,
that was a recent one. Because these days I still watch a lot of movies, and I'm unimpressed a lot. But every once in a while a gem like that comes through, and I'm like, man, that was good. I personally think that your performance in Hot Chama was outstanding, and you deserved a major award for that. But also, I loved your cameo in Pineapple Express, and I've been a fan of all the things that you've done, David, so far. And I really, I look forward, hopefully, to see the feature. I would love to see it happen, and maybe even one that you've written. I would love to see, you work with Matt or with David and those boys at some point in the future, because it's so many things I'm looking at and watching these days is into neuroscience and the way that thoughts create your life, and then how the technologies are advancing, like our length of life. So even though we're our age and we consider ourselves like old, man, we could live another 40 years, right? And so if that's the case, we have so much work that could happen, and with the experience that you have, the sky's the limit. As Michael Jordan says, the ceiling is the roof.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. My nephew wants to be a filmmaker, and to an extent, he is. He's been making short movies on his iPads for a very long time. My older brother asked me to put a list together of movies that he should watch that I think are great movies, and I stopped at 251 when I realized there's too much out there, too much content out there. So I sent him that list, and I'm like, yeah, I know it's overwhelming and daunting. It's a big list, but those are all movies that I think are worthy of seeing. But there's thousands, and I think you learn from good movies, bad movies, every movies. I mean, some of the worst movies I've ever worked on are still some of my favorite projects that I've ever worked on, and also contact the people who you want to work with. I wrote 66 letters when I was in school to the filmmakers that I wanted to work with, and I got 2 responses, and one of them was from Julie Corman, and that's what got me out to LA before I even went to film school. Roger Corman's wife, who's a great filmmaker herself, producer. So I went out and I became her assistant, and then to fill in for her assistant who was on maternity leave. And then she gave me an impossible task. I was able to complete it. She asked me what I wanted to do. And I was like, oh, I want to direct. She said, no, what do you want to do here? What do you want to do now? And I was like, well, I want to move into post-production. I want to edit. So she moved me into a second assistant position on Bucket of Blood. Bucket of Blood was directed by Mike McDonnell and starred Anthony Michael Hall and Justine Bateman. David Green just made Halloween and Halloween 2, which will come out, which is already done, but will come out not this Halloween, but the next Halloween because of the pandemic. I went to a screening, an early screening of that, and it's, you know, it starred two of the actors in it was Anthony Michael Hall and Mike McDonald, who directed Bucket of Blood. So I, you know, I joked with Dave, and he's like, I totally forgot about that. So, you know, got to reconnect with them. So, you know, everything in the film industry is very, you know, secular. And,
yeah. Well, and just so you know, because I always have faith that, you know, something's going to come across your table. Now that I have kind of scaled back some things, I'm not aggressively going after hundreds of things entrepreneurially due to the COVID and other things. I'm available for castings. And so when you have that right moment, you know, give me a call. I don't even have an agent these days. You can call me direct on the cell, David, and I'll come out and, you know, like put my little piece in your masterpiece.
you know, I've seen you act, and that would be a worthy casting. So,
well, you know, I'm really proud of you, David, and not just as someone that has gone out and been one of those people that did what they wanted to do and are living their dream. And sometimes we lose sight that that's what we're doing, you know, and that's what we've been able to do. So it helps us to look back and go, you know, I got to do all these things, and that is a culmination of who I am today. And I think that you should be extremely proud of what you've done and the work that you continue to do, of being a great dad and of being a great husband. And I think you're an awesome friend to have as well, man. And I just want to thank you. I know you're crazy busy and stuff, but you're taking time out of your day to chat with me about movies and the expertise that you have in them and the lens that you see them through is really cool. And I think a lot of people are going to get some great gold nuggets out of this. And I really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
well, watch movies, go to the drive-in, and yeah, you know, enjoy it. And you know, you remind me. We've had this conversation before, but you remind me of me, and that, you know, our story paths are similar. And yeah, you know, what's that? Well,
I thought I'm a lot shorter, right?
yeah. So it's
but no, that's
so
flattering.
you know, you know, I'm tall for the industry. You know, average height is probably here in the industry.
That's right. I keep telling my daughter, I'm like, I'm average height, man, especially in the movie industry. No, but it's always enjoyable.
I can fly planes or drive submarines. So
That's right. You know, and that's one thing I'm going to bring up in the other heightest conversations I have with somebody really tall. But it's like, you know, you can't do. So that's good. Thank you for that. Man, it's what a treat, dude. Thank you so much for being on the show. And give me a call anytime, dude. Let's catch up. And I hope to be out in LA after a lot of this stuff calms down. I'm going to come down and probably take the family out and spend a couple weeks. So I hope to get together with you, maybe see a movie in the backyard and hang out with some old friends, you know.
yeah. Well, I hope to be back at my morning coffee routine at Common Grounds at some point also.
Yeah,
you know, and
you come in Greensboro, you better call me.
And I hope the you know, film industry in North Carolina picks back up. And I know it's picking back up a little bit, but you know, the plan was to do in North Carolina what George Lucas did in Northern California. You know, I wanted to make the North Carolina movie farm. You know, and Dave Green and Jody and Dania, basically, they're doing that in South Carolina. But we all wanted to do it in North Carolina. But, you know, it's just, you know, it's getting better, but it drove a lot of people away. So hopefully that gets better.
Well, and as you said, man, you know, focusing on the fact that good stories are good stories, and there's a lot in your mind, man. So I hope they come out, and I hope the world gets to see them. I will definitely do anything to do, man. And please tell Lucas and the beautiful wife I said hello. And give my best to the family. And I will call you sometime next week and let you know when we're going to queue you up and send this out, man, so you can send it to all your famous friends.
I don't know about that.
Hey, I love you, man. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks,
Yeah. Talk to you later. Bye.